If you're doing it for money, I would say this: if you're doing it for money, that's not the way to. That's not the answer. Because if you're doing it for money, then you have to do business plans on the artist your book you're grabbing to make your label a defected.
Okay, today is October 17th, 2024. Who are we speaking with?
This is Bradford James out of New York City, New Jersey. Actually, I live in New Jersey now. So,
Excellent.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Seed Recordings, artist, label owner, uh, Yoruba Records artist, a few other labels. But yeah, yeah, that's event programmer, DJ, all that.
House music, how'd you get into it?
That's an interesting story. I mean, I'm a hip hop head. I started off in hip hop, so hip hop, freestyle, and house kind of like was all brothers and sisters. So, my first records probably were like Masters at Work, Louis Vega, in the early 1989, 90, because, there was a hip hop reggae side. And then on the other side was the introduction to house music to me, you know? So I would say that's what got me into house. But then obviously the culture behind it after that was what kept me into it. And it actually was a transitional thing where I was fed up with hip hop at one point in my life, and house really took me from there. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite DJ growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like hip hop wise, it would probably be like Red Alert, you know, Grandmaster Flash was kind of like my introduction to hip hop and, DJing. So I would say that would like I have to give him the person who inspired me to want to DJ. It would be
Nice.
Grandmaster Flash.
And then as a DJ, what is your intention when you DJ?
To make people move. That's really it. To make people move. Whether they
Describe. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
whether so I'm very, people call me abstract and eclectic ways and times, but it's all like, my label's called Soul Enters Every Dancer. So that kind of like seed is Soul Enters Every Dancer. It started as a party and and then that was the idea. We were playing music for dancers, for people to really move, circle children, and we were catering to that. And I think that's what we've always done, so that's why we DJ, because we express the feeling, and then the feeling gets pushed back and forth through the dancer, and it's just a symbiotic thing that inspires each other. And then the music, of course, you got to love the music, you know, you know, the jazz roots, every root of different genres all melted into something that makes you want to dance. So yeah.
Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
So I actually was born in Attleboro, Massachusetts, grew up in Rhode Island till and then I moved to Boston. So I was throwing parties in small markets to medium-sized markets to obviously moving to New York. But yeah, that's so I was DJing since I was, 15 years old. So all through my early 20s, I was DJing all the time, whether it be, parties, clubs, um, you know, um, raves at one point, you know. And then so at the same time of all that, I was, throwing parties geared towards, the dancers. And then, from there, you know, I moved to Boston and took the idea, and it really blew up there for a good 5 to 6 years, you know. And then from there, from there I moved to New York.
Was there a moment where you decided DJing is what I want to do? This is it.
Um, Always. That was always part of who I was. So it's like it didn't matter if I had to hold a day job or whatever. It doesn't matter. It wasn't. It was more or less like you do what you gotta do to survive, and the music, like either you get it, you gotta, it's like I've been DJing since 15. I was 15 years old, so there's got to be something that makes me want to do it, you know. So for this long, anyways, right? So it becomes part of your. It's like a musician playing an instrument. You know, if they're connected to the instrument, they're gonna play it regardless if they're getting paid or not. So
Um,
it was, so music. Oh, that's an extension of playing music. I can play music in my house, on Twitch, on a party. It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of just playing the music.
and tell us about the New York scene when you first arrived versus how has it evolved?
All right, so I was connected to Neff Nunez in New York back in the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and because my one of my partners in my label was Ovius.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so Ovi was connected to the shelter scene, and obviously Neff was connected to the shelter scene and the underground scene in New York. So we were throwing parties in '99 to 2000, doing like one-off parties. Because I'd come to New York all the time, and we'd throw some parties, one-off parties, and at that point in time, obviously meatpacking district for me was still a meatpacking district, so seeing like, underground parties pre 9/11, it just was different. I feel it was very different. It was more artistic. Like people were able to do things that you can't do today in New York. So I've got to witness that, and that's what actually made me want to move to New York. So I was trying to move to New York for 10 years before I moved to New York, but life has its ways to say not yet, right? So, when I finally moved to New York, I really felt an energetic vibration here that you can't you can't feel anywhere else. Because I went from Boston, which we had shelter heads. Like all my parties were full of shelter heads. We'd go back and forth to shelter all the time. But it was different because we're doing something on a small scale, on a small level, in a small club, you know, very memorable moments, where, we had the room connected, so that's beautiful. That's a beautiful side of when I was in Boston. And then at a certain point, I made my transition to Brooklyn, and right away I felt it. And, it just was like game on, let's go, you know? And at that point in time too, there was no clubs. Like there really no clubs around besides, Cielo, of course, and maybe a couple here and there, Pasha, but and actually Shelter was happening on Van Wyck, I think at that time too, you know. Because I moved to Brooklyn in 2009,
Got it.
you know. So yeah, and then, from that point on, doing loft parties, throwing a lot of loft parties, where nobody was really doing loft parties. And we
What's the
were
secret what's the secret to a successful loft party?
the lineup, the timing, the time of the year. There's a few different things. Like obviously promotion is big, but sometimes you don't need promotion if you have a lineup that people can't deny. And I was teamed up with somebody who, you know, really got it on that level. And, because he was from Chicago, and his name's Louis Barrow from Chicago. He was involved with like obviously XM radio and the whole rave scene in Chicago. So I was linked up with him. We were doing a galactic parties, which went only for 1 year, but we had some crazy lineups. Like, and one night, Frankie Feliciano, Tony Humphreys, Tyrone Francis, you know, and some Chicago guys, you know? So it was pretty crazy in the sense of we were grabbing soulful scene shelter heads and some of the, I would say, like transplants from Chicago and stuff, you know. Kind of
This
fast forwarding, but that's
No, I like that. Describe the shelter experience for someone that's never gone. Tell us about you. Actually, tell us about your first time to shelter.
my first time at shelter. My first time at shelter, I actually played on the roof when it was at Club Speed, right? So my first time at shelter was my birthday, and I happened to know the promoter who was doing the roof, right? So he's like, "Yo, I'll have you play on the roof." And I remember Carolyn Bird was on the roof that night. It was like a skate ramp. Do you remember that spot
Yeah,
when it
yeah,
was a skate ramp on the roof?
yeah.
I played on the shed on top of the roof, and I was playing like soulful stuff, right? And Carolyn Bird, she was like, I love what you're playing." That I met Robbie, and then Spinner was playing at the same time downstairs, and then when I was done, Timmy was taking over, and then it was over. That was my first shelter experience, which was pretty crazy.
What makes shelter so special?
The people, of course. The music, obviously, the music is gonna be dope because Timmy just gets in when Timmy gets into his zones, or even Sting at one point in time when Sting was taking care of doing that. There was Timmy and Sting. They, from my perspective, because I don't know I wasn't in shelter before that. When Blaze and all those guys were involved with shelter, right? So from when I was going we would go on a bus ride to New York or drive. We get there around 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, the it's changing from one kind of party to another. It's like we're winding down but ready to wind back up. you know so always the people side, meeting, Phil Sonic and all the, you know Ben Johnson and everybody that was involved with Freddie and everybody. That was for me, because I would see Boo Williams, I would see all these people coming through because they're catching the vibe, and the dancers and everyone who loves the music, and to this, and they're still around today. you know uh they were there and they were creating the vibe, and Timmy was just beating them. you know just that was that.
What is soulful house?
Music with a feeling. House music with a feeling.
How would you describe your DJ style?
I am eclectic. I play in the realm of house, but I can go from 115 to 130. You know, there it can go from there. It can go on that journey, and I'm a storyteller. Um, I like to, I get deep into psychoacoustics. Studying Ron and Joe and Louis, and so because, and Ocean Latte, of course, when you get into the psychoacoustics of the sound related to the sound system, it really gets you open-minded, or gets you into a channel of a sound of music that allows you to, play different frequencies, that make you feel a certain way. Not just playing just to play loud. I'm talking about playing to feel something. So I try to do that. I don't call myself a DJ that's playing like this the whole night. I'm going like this on a roller coaster ride, and that's my style. You know.
Let's talk about production. You've got Seed Recordings. Tell us
hmm
about the production process from the idea to a song to a finished process. Tell us about that journey.
It is turn the equipment on. There is no. I don't have an idea in my head and I come try to write it. I just turn it on and I zone into it. I find inspiration and move from that inspiration, and in the moment, it's a present moment thing. Yeah, same thing, going back to psychoacoustics, finding a sound that, makes you feel a certain way, and then taking that sound and making something out of it. You know, that's uh that's what I do. I turn, like, it could be simple thing is just turning the MPC on and just making a drum loop to, then into a chord. Writing, period. Like I've learned that you need to write all the time. So I'm not a songwriter. So my writing of songs is instrumental. So as I take my musicianship and um my tools to achieve that. So I have my, obviously, you have your comfort zone of what equipment you use to build on. And it could be in the computer, it could be in a hardware, it could be just hooking all the stuff up and having a jam session for an hour, and then finding something that you say, oh man, that was good that I did that there. I can work off that. You know, there's a lot of different ways to, make music. There's really no one way. It's just, if you love music and you want to create, as a creator, that's me as a creator. I just need the tool to create. The canvas is already there. I just have to press some buttons.
How do you know when the record's done?
I play it. I play it out. I listen to it. Um, Twitch was good for that, actually, because people are just listening on Twitch, so it was a good avenue to play unreleased music. But I heard recently that they changed their whole platform to where everything has to be licensed, and that's kind of weird. That's part of the process is, like, I'll give you an example. Louis, you think about Louis' process. When he's creating new music, he's experimenting. The minute he makes it, he has a party that night. Best believe he's playing it, even if it's a loop. Because he wants to see the feeling. He wants to see how the crowd feels to it. So that's I do this kind of do the same thing. I've learned that trick of his, that process.
What's the most unexpected place your career in the music industry has taken you?
Um, that's a good question. Detroit,
Say more.
Detroit. So back in 2000, and I want to say 2003. Actually, there's a few places, actually. Detroit, Canada, but Detroit. My first time going to Detroit was like 2003, and that was my first experience with the Detroit sound. I mean, obviously, I knew who Theo Parrish was and all the Detroit cats, but I wasn't. My mind was New York all the time. Being in being in the New England area, your focus was always New York, right? So experiencing Detroit during the Detroit Electronic Music Festival before it was movement was the game changer for me. That's when I was like, dang, you can really bang it, and it can be soulful as hell, you know? And yeah, that was a special place. And then to be able to play a party, my first time going there was even better, but I got to take in that whole vibe, and that vibe had a huge impact on the future of my career, you know,
After so many years in the industry, how do you remain excited and motivated?
because I think you never, for me, musically, I haven't done my best thing yet in my own mind. And there's really, like, I've been doing this all my life, you know, having some sort of part in music, whether it was early childhood musicianship to getting into hip hop culture to getting into house music culture. All through all that, um, I come from the butters. Remember, the term butters, like, getting that sound that makes you be like, what the fuck, you know? So I am determined to, that's like a drug. It's a drug, to hear a sound you never heard before, but makes you give you the stinky face. And, I live for that, and so the inspiration that makes me want to do this all the time is getting that reaction. You know what I'm saying? When people, so sometimes the reaction is, yo, what the hell is this? And then it's your music, you know, that's the same kind of reaction. So I live for that reaction, just not for, the ego side, but for the side of people are feeling it, because I'm channeling an energy that I'm trying to push, if that makes any sense.
All right. No, it totally makes sense. Let's talk about the business side of DJing. As a label owner, what advice would you give to aspiring producers who want to get their music out?
Start a band camp, create your own following. Number one, that's it. You don't need anything else. Start a band camp and start creating your own following. It happens like that. And nowadays, I feel like nowadays that's the most important part, because now you kind of have, as a label, you have ownership of your fan base. Not ownership, but you have control of your listener. When you're on all these digital platforms, through an aggregator, who's getting the data? Who are your fans? I don't know who's buying my music. I only know that it charted on a chart, but there's, thousands of listens, thousands of downloads. Who's buying the music? Bandcamp, who's buying your music. So if I was starting from scratch, I would just concentrate on my music and expressing myself. People are going to gravitate towards you, and then that's where collaboration happens. The collaboration happens by someone feeling your music and say, yo, I like to do something with that person. And then the spider web happens, and that's the purest way I think you could do it, without worrying about someone else's, advertising skills, promotional skills, blah, blah, blah. Just create your own following, and do collaborate. Obviously, put music out on other labels, because you want to connect to their fan base. But I think that happens first before that other part happens, because all it takes is one person to play your music that has a lot of influence, and then it's over. Definitely, if it kicks off, if the record kicks off, and everyone wants to play it, they'll know who you are very quick. And then you're getting remixes, and that's it. Then 10 years later, that person has his own record label. You know what I mean? With his own culture or subculture connected to the culture, or wherever they are in the world. If you're doing it for money, I would say this: if you're doing it for money, that's not that's not the answer. Because if you're doing it for money, then you have to do business plans on the artist you're grabbing to make your label a defected, right? But if you're organic and you want to just put out a sound, or contribute to a sound, make your contributions, that's the way to do it. I tell every artist that's connected to my label, you better have a band camp, because I don't want to release everything that you got. I want you to create a fan base so that your fans go everywhere that you are, right? So that's part of that's part of the process.
Is there any money in a record label?
No, it's depends who you are. I think every single person I know, they're not making a living off of track source and Beatport. They have some other business going on. If they're selling records, vinyl, and even that, there's more value in the vinyl than there is the digital, but even that is, a barely breaking even endeavor.
So how do you sustain yourself?
It's well, for me, obviously, if you want to create your popularity so that you can get bookings, and the bookings you can travel around the world and live that life. That's one way. But there's things that happen before that. You have to be part of a culture for you to be even acknowledged, or invited. So you have to have some kind of popularity in that sense, and could sustain you. It's a tough life. Everyone who does it for a living, they're tired. A lot of traveling beats you up. So, but that's a job. And then the music happens, and the music makes it worth it. So there's multiple ways to make a living. You can't, and it's the same way if you were a musician, you have to tour to make a living. So the music's the promotional side of you. So you can make a little bit of money. I know people that do make money, doing, bootlegs and stuff like that, but that's still, it's not, 6 figures a year. It's spare change.
Let's talk about work-life balance. You've got a family, you have a wife and kids. How do you find the time for house music?
So my wife teaches yoga, so that gives me a little bit of time throughout so I work my day job. I'm an engineer during the day, and
What kind of engineer?
a civil engineer, actually, a civil engineer. I build neighborhoods. So I do that during the day. That's a different side of your brain, dealing with math, even though math is in music too, but it's a different kind of math. You know, so having that side of my brain keeps me sharp. And then, coming home, the music will make me forget about all that. So once I turn my music switch on, my day didn't exist. At one point in time, I was doing music full time, and I felt like I was getting into creative blocks because I have all this time to make music. Sometimes limitation allows you to be very creative because you're using your time wisely. So not having the stress of sustaining my family through music makes me love music more. Because what can really happen, I've learned this before I was married, was when you start depending on the music, the financial burden of the financial gain of music, it gets you bitter very fast. Because you're always worried about, this party's not going to pay me any money, or nobody showed up, or those hurdles happen, or nobody's booking me. So when you eliminate that situation, it's all about the music. And when it's all about the music, now you get into the essence of the purity of it, and then you're making your best music, and there's positive energy in it, right? So if there's positive energy, there's positive intention, where if you're doing something to try to make a dollar off it, it takes away from that energy source. And 9 times out of 10, that's how music is made for the people who really love the music, right? It just it's just what ends up happening. Once it's played, people gravitate towards it because they can feel the honest intention, all about the music. Forget about everything else, politics and parties. It's all about that's when it's all about the music. So you zone in.
What was the turning point for you where you said, let me go get this day job?
After I got married. After I got married, I don't. My wife works a full-time job, and I didn't want her to. I didn't want her to do it by herself. So you have to contribute. You have to put your big boy pants on. That's it. So I had to contribute to my family. So you do whatever you have to do that. But I met my wife through music.
Oh, really?
So
Tell us
yeah.
that story.
So yeah, my wife, she's best friends with Frankie Feliciano. So, she's been in the scene she's a native New Yorker from Queens. So she's, been in the club scene all her life. So when we connected, I was actually throwing a party with E-Man. I used to throw a party with E-Man called Uplifted. It was like it was called the rebirth of Bang the Party, called Uplifted, right? And we were doing that in Brooklyn at a place called the Counting Room. And that was before Output opened. And one day, like I've met her through a few different other DJs, Master Kev, and a few we have mutual friends. But then one day she came to my party and we connected. And then from there on, I tell her it's been a perpetual present moment. We got married a year later, and now, 10, 11 years now.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the future. Where do you see the future of DJing and house music heading?
I think house music, it depends on what you determine what you consider house music. If you're looking for on the floor house music, I think that's a genre itself, right? So that will always be there. But the house music I look at is, you know, Afro-Cuban soul music. And that will never die. That will continue because that's organic music. It's just on a 4/4 metronome. But that's feeling music. That's dance music. Four on the floor, Chicago styles of music. They'll always be there in their place because you'll have younger generations that gravitate towards that. At one point because they're young and they go to those type of parties, right? But then as you get sophisticated, it's like jazz. I feel like house music, soulful house music's like jazz. The trajectory of jazz. Jazz has never died. It never will die. It's just part of the creativity of making music and playing music. I feel like the soulful side of house music is that. So that will just continue to evolve with the players that are playing it, are creating it. That's what I see the future.
What advice would you give to young DJs who are starting out today?
Go to parties. If you're of age, go to parties. Meet people. Meet the people throwing the party. Be a regular. let them know you DJ. Doesn't hurt. I wouldn't say give them a mix because I think those days are over. But if when you have people that because throwing parties, I get this happens all the time. So this is the perspective I'm going to give you because I get this. I've been cultivating young DJs lately, where a lot of DJs happening in New York that are in their 20s are and even younger actually because we have the Amir Brooks and you know uh, just the DJ. You know they're I know Amir's in his 20, 21, 22 now, but you know they started when he was 15, maybe even actually younger, 12, 15. But I think for me, throwing a party, I need the younger generation. The younger generation was me at one point in time in my life. You know, the biggest problem with New York, and I'm not going to say it's a problem because really I'm one of them now. You know, I'm 53 years old, so you know, I am in that club now. And I know that the importance is not to be a gatekeeper, but to bring new people together because now it's I have a duty. I have a duty to continue a legacy of culture that's happening in New York City. So I would be foolish to not support the younger generation, you know, just because of ego and being, you know, no, you know, there's just too many gatekeepers in this world, especially in music, where, you know, unless you know a certain person, you don't get the opportunity. You know, so that being the case, if you're just starting out, you need to know people. You need to know people. And maybe not that party that will be playing, but somebody at that party is throwing a party and maybe young too, and they're just getting into it. They may be a step higher than you, and they invite you to play with them. And then all of a sudden now that party was a success, and then you get another opportunity. It just becomes a domino effect. And I feel like especially when you come to New York from other places, I remember my first year in New York, I was playing all the time. I was playing almost every weekend. I was hungry for it, you know, and because people knew me from my Boston parties, people wanted to jump on and it's like, you're here, let's go, right? But at a certain point, um, that slowed down, and then I started doing my own parties, you know. So I understand the whole idea of and New York, especially in New York, New York's a special place because you know you can find different people in different scenes, and you know there's 20 different scenes going on in New York at a time. You know, no matter what you know era you're talking, right? So you know there's so many parties you go on Resident Advisor that on any given day there's so many parties going on because everyone's a DJ and all the bars and all the places in Brooklyn and there's so many different places where they're just bars and you're just playing music in them that you can go out any on one night and meet five people you don't know, never knew before. And that just opens up an opportunity for something else or a friendship, music collaboration, all different things like that. So that's what I would say to a young DJ. Number one, you're young, you can go out all the time, do it, you know, meet people. And nine times out of 10, from what I've seen, the people that do that playing 10 parties in a month, you know,
Let's
playing
talk
little
about
parties here and there. Yeah.
let's talk about legacy and impact. How do you want to be remembered as an artist and as a person?
Um, as a person, I would say a soldier for the community, for the music, a soldier of the music. I'm a soldier of the music. I'm not trying to be famous. I'm just trying to be, I'm just a soldier. I'm just someone carrying a torch and passing it. You know, and the music on the music side, if my music can, if anything of it that I've made can break through and continue to play on after I'm gone, that's good enough for me.
I love that. What's next for Bradford James? What's next for Seed Recordings? What do you want people to know about? And also, how do if people want to book you? How do they contact you?
Or they can contact me on IG. You just DM me on IG or my um, my email address, seedrec@gmail.com. That would work too. And Seed Recordings, you know, we're working with a lot of Detroit, I mean, not Detroit, Chicago artists, Aki Dawson and Dovey Cote. Very soulful. They're, you know, my inspirations are Theo Parrish, Ron Trent, Osunlade, Larry Levan, uh, Joe Clausel, Larry Hurd. I'm a follower of the Herd. So anyone who's connected to that kind of any like-minded individual like that, that's what I gravitate towards, you know? So that being the case, some of the artists that have been gracing my label lately, you know, are artists in Chicago that work with Larry Hurd. And so that's kind of like where the label is right now, along with, you know, some my music, of course, and other young producers that are up and coming. So that's also Seed, the label has always been a planting, if you would say, of new producers and artists. You know, artists like Bodhisattva, uh, Azel, Jay Tripwire, all different kinds of artists, Trinidadian Deep. They've all been on my label at one point in time in their career early before they blew up and gone on to do unbelievable things, you know. So that label side, I'm always looking for the next big artist that's going to, you know, it's like part of their process. Go on a label that, you know, allows you to express yourself if you're in the realm of what I just said, the artist I just said. You know, you don't have to sound like any of them, but there is a commonality that they all have. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the great interview.
Thank you, Wayma. I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye.